Good morning, everybody, and welcome to what's become kind of a traditional annual event at the AUB New York office. We're holding this high-level event as part of the CSW 69. And I just want to start by saying that the whole idea actually comes from a very special feminist conversation in Kazakhstan with Professor Butch. I'm very happy to have here. And it was about the whole journey from Beijing in 1995 and getting here to feminist foreign policy. And so everybody who's in this first very special segment is very heavily involved in this journey from Beijing to feminist foreign policy, and we're looking forward to your insights. We have a small change in the first segment of this program, so bear with us. And we want to start with a welcome message by the president of AUB, Dr. Fadlo Khuri. Yesterday, President Khuri was with us. Last year. This time he's sent a recorded welcome message to everybody. So we will begin with that, and then we will start our program.
Good morning, colleagues. Thank you for inviting me. My thanks to Lina Abou-Habib, the director of the Asfari Institute for Civil Society at the American University of Beirut, for allowing me to speak to you today. It's a pleasure to be with you at this critical 69th U.S. Commission on the Status of Women meeting, and the conference that goes on, which is a capstone or a milestone each year for the American University of Beirut, accompanying the U.S. Commission on the Status of Women conference. This is a special meeting. It's 30 years since the famous Beijing Platform of Action that was called together at the meeting that the United Nations sponsored to look at the rights and empowerment of women. And this is a meeting that led to the concept of feminist foreign policy being launched. It's critical during these times when we are concerned about our planet, we're concerned about the protection of the rights of individuals in their societies, to revisit not only the accomplishments that have been already achieved, but those yet to do. It's also just as critical to connect different generations of activists. So the generations from 30 years ago that led the Beijing Platform of Action, and the leaders from today, 30 years later, who are studying and trying to promote what is a feminist foreign policy and what is an inclusive foreign policy for all. The American University of Beirut has a long, long history of empowering women and what I would call marginalized, or at least initially unequal components of society, people who are not given their full civil rights, their full powers, and are working to gain those powers and to contribute positively to society. Our first women graduates, full-time students, really were enrolled in the early 1920s, 1921 to be precise. We celebrated 100 years of women at AUB a few years ago. And today we're working with the governments of Finland, Mexico, and Chile, UN Women, Colegio de Mexico, and 3 of our international partner organizations to put on this special conference. The goal of this conference is to always see what we've learned from the past so we can apply it and improve it for the future. So looking back in order to look forward. And I'm confident that today you'll be able to develop some important steps forward, informed by everything that's been accomplished in the last 30 years in particular. The United Nations and the United States, Lebanon, other countries are constantly undergoing change. There is no fixed point in time. something we at the American University of Beirut know all too well. We've been faced with challenge after challenge, not just in the last decade, but for much of our 159 years of history. And we tried to rise the occasion informed by the past, but aware of our responsibilities towards the future. So today, as you convene to look forward, I'm delighted you're being hosted at our DEBS Center by its director, Ada Porter, by Lina Abou-Habib, who is the director of the Asfar Institute, but also that you'll have the opportunity to tackle the big challenges together and to discuss them frankly. There's no question that women leaders are far less likely to lead to wars and to unhealthy rivalries. That doesn't mean women are any less competitive, but they have a, shall we say, more peaceful, more rational way of resolving disputes. So in closing, I hope you continue to empower, embrace this feminist foreign policy that's been so important for moving and hoping towards a healthier and more inclusive and more peaceful world in the 21st century. And I wish you the best of luck. Thank you very much.
Again, I want to welcome you, and I'm very happy to see all of you around the table. I want to start with opening remarks by Professor Charlotte Bunch. Charlotte, it's amazing for you to be with us. For those of you who don't know, Charlotte is also our Senior International Fellow at the Asfar Institute, the American University in Beirut. It's a privilege to have you with us. And Charlotte has been not only in part of this journey, but actually a maker and breaker in this journey. So it's such an amazing thing to have you with us, to have your opening remarks and your thoughts about from Beijing until now, although you go back pre-Beijing as well. So over to you.
I'm going to stand up because I need to see people when I'm talking to you. And this is kind of a long, I have to say, a patriarchal kind of tape. I'm thrilled to be here as we remake the patriarchy for our own purposes, and particularly to be here with my new hat as an Asfari Senior International Fellow. Some of you may know me in previous hats, which I will bring along in my 50 years of feminist organizing, but it really is just a year. That's kind of scary. And that doesn't mean I'm 50. I'm well over 50. I'm not counting my grade school organizing. So I would like to just begin. I mean, many of you have been on this journey together with me and so many others around the world by reminding us that the Beijing World Conference and the NGO Forum was itself not the beginning, but the culmination of a 20-year process from the UN World Conference in 1975 in Mexico City, and including the conferences in Copenhagen in 1980, and particularly Nairobi in 1985. I still think of Nairobi in 1985 as the birthplace of global feminism, when we really realized that we were a global movement. Not only were we separate women's movements that were happening all over the world, but that we were and could be even more a global movement. And I think much of the success of Beijing is really built on that 20 years, but particularly Nairobi, because that was the moment that so many women from around the world found each other and were able to begin the process that was so crucial to Beijing of identifying our common interests and working, struggling how to cross the divisions, north, south, east, west, that the world had, which were affecting all of us and of course did affect us, but at the same time, how could we begin to pave the way toward a real global understanding of what we had in common and how we could learn from our differences. And I always think it's so important when you say what you have in common, it doesn't mean that we're all the same. It means that we each bring our differences to some common issues, domination, violence, issues of the economy, issues of lack of political power. We all bring a different way of seeing the issue from those differences, but we also learn more and more. I say there will never be universal human rights until we know the human rights struggle of every person in the universe, because it is only as human rights applies to everyone's situation that we could call it truly universal. So when I say universal and common, I don't mean to homogenize us, but rather to build on that diversity. And I think Nairobi, for me, was really the point at which I thought this is really possible. We have a level of sophistication around the world about all the issues that we're facing. Certainly the major networks like Dawn that emerged at the time of Nairobi with an analysis of development from a feminist perspective. Women living under Muslim laws was emerging with a perspective about women in that context. The women law and development networks were being built. There was a moment that Nairobi kind of crystallized of seeing that feminists from civil society could build a movement that would take seriously governments. Because I think myself and many of us really went to the world conferences in the beginning to see other feminists, to find out what women were doing elsewhere. And our focus was on the forums more than it was on the government negotiations. But what we saw, I think, in Copenhagen to some degree, but even more in Nairobi, was actually we could interact with the feminists who were starting to be in government and begin to take seriously a real alliance. That, again, when I think about why was Beijing possible, it was possible because we could build a strong civil society, but we had allies of feminists in government now who we could work with to help produce that program. And we could work across north, south, east, west, various political lines to understand that the real problem was those who opposed women's rights, was what we now talk about as a backlash, was the issue. So it was also an exciting time. I have to say, for those of us who remember when the UN was talking about a non-aligned fund and the new international economic order, it was a time when you felt like anything could happen, especially but when the Cold War kind of came to a collapse, not exactly in the form we now think of the Trump alliance, but the breaking down of the old Cold War alliances. So I think women had been doing a number of things, but there were two particular breakthroughs that I think we took into Beijing from working with each other. One was we had developed an understanding of what were the issues that particularly affected women's lives that were not on the global agenda, and how to frame them in terms that the global agenda would understand. And for me, this was the underpinning of our women's rights as human rights movement, was to understand that women's rights had been kept separate from human rights, and that what we had to do was to reframe the ways in which people saw so-called women's issues into women's rights that were the equivalent to all the other issues of human rights. That violence against women was our lead example because it was so clear that the violence that women experienced was parallel to all the terms of human rights, of torture, of arbitrary detention. You could go down the whole list of human rights terminology and find the equivalent experience of women that had not been seen in those circles. But similar things were happening around reproductive and sexual rights, and beginning to redefine how those terms fit the traditional ones. And there was also the amazing work that was being done around the environment, the Earth Summit in Rio, and the attempt to really show what the Earth destruction meant from a feminist perspective. Where we need that right now for the climate change, right? I think that's one of the demands I expect those of you who are going to speak to the future could talk about. Where is that energy that we had for Rio in thinking about the climate today? And this was sort of putting those issues on the agenda, but also reinterpreting, and I jumped into my second one, reinterpreting the mainstream issues of peace, environment, health, transportation, climate, from a feminist perspective, so that we realized there were not women's issues. There were feminist perspectives on all the issues. And today we understand that violence against women and violence in the family doesn't only affect women, it affects everyone, and it's everyone's issue. And similarly, every issue is a feminist issue, is an issue we should have a feminist perspective on. I think those were the kind of key breakthroughs that came in that Nairobi to Beijing period through all the world conferences that we women went to and all the organizing that was going on the ground. So the Beijing platform was a triumph of both of these strands of beginning this work, and it was a triumph of us learning how to frame what we saw in feminist terms and connect it to the world global agenda. And I think we were able to do it in part. There was some backlash already, but in part because a lot of the governments didn't really expect any of it to be taken seriously. And so when we said violence is human rights issue, oh, sure, violence is bad. They didn't expect us to go to the Human Rights Council and to go to all the UN agencies and start demanding, or to go to our local or national courts and start demanding that these laws be interpreted differently. I think they really didn't take us as fully seriously. In some ways, the opposition, the right-wing opposition, and some of the religious opposition took us much more seriously than many of the governments, and that's why they were in opposition, because they understood that what we were saying was a threat to the patriarchal, dominant economic and political mode of the world. So, and that's maybe what I want to end with, because I'm probably talking too long. But I think the Beijing accomplishments and the 30, is it really 30 years? Yeah. The 30 years since Beijing has been a dance between accomplishment and backlash. Mm. It has been a dance and intersectional and intertwined. We must keep in perspective that there have been many advances. And it is precisely because of those advances, because we took ourselves seriously. And now governments understand that women are a serious political force, that we see the intensity of the backlash. But this last, all the reviews, we can all remember the conversations we've had. In all the reviews, we were trying to defend things that had been easier to get in Beijing, as hard as it was to do that, because they didn't really fully grasp what we would do with those documents. And so that's why I think we keep defending the Beijing platform, because it is the baseline for a very strong feminist move forward. And I think the advances have been in the legal sphere. Everyone's going to talk about this. One of them has been feminist foreign policy. The idea that foreign policy, the height of international negotiation and national security, should have a feminist perspective. The very audacity of the term feminist foreign policy is what we are doing, as we are challenging and we are focusing on a lot today, but also all the kinds of backlash. I think about several years ago in Peru, when I started hearing the phrase, no te metas mi hijos, don't touch my children. And now we see in the US and in many parts of the world, the whole focus on schools. That's because they call it gender ideology. We call it feminism, but it is a new interpretation of the relations of men and women, and they understand that it is a threat to their order. And that's why we have opposition. Backlash always comes when you touch a nerve. And we did touch a nerve in Beijing. It's kind of the symbol of that. It's not all in the document. We all have many things that are left out of the document, but as a symbol of the nerve of touching patriarchy and of coming together across divisions between civil society and government, divisions between North, South, etc. It is a symbol of what the feminist analysis and movement can mean for building a new world. And that's why I keep defending it, even though we know there's much more to be done. So I would like to just say, we can only defend it if we claim, if our coalitions and our movements to defend include the human rights of all, to come back to the universality, because the main tactic of those who are opposing us is to divide us, to pick off the most vulnerable. LGBT rights, now the transgender is the most vulnerable, so let's pick that up. Indigenous rights, well, you can find some of the people who are least defended, and you can pick that up. Racial rights, you can cite in each society. Who are the untouchables? Who are the ones that, can be picked off? So I think our understanding is universal human rights and feminism demand that we claim human rights for all and not allow blame the migrants, blame the Jews, blame the Muslims, blame the homosexuals, blame the whoever's to win in our societies, because every society has its own scapegoat, and only build coalitions that actually defend all and not at the expense of any. And the UN, in my view, is still one of the places where we can work in those coalitions. Not the only place, not by any means, and I'm sure all the panels will talk about other places, but where feminist foreign policies can challenge these divisions at the highest level of national security, and we can all continue to build on the successes of this 50-year journey from Mexico City. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte. And I think this is a great segue to move direct into Mexico. As we've been working in trying to understand the ways in which that this foreign policy are necessary for many of us in the global south, particularly in a region where it's still not happening. One of the most powerful alliances has been with Latin American countries that have been pioneers in adopting their feminist foreign policy, adopting it and not going back on it. Which was a great achievement. And I'm happy to have with us for the second time running Alicia Buenrostro, the Deputy Representative of Mexico at the UN. It's really amazing to have you with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lina, and a pleasure to be with all of you here this morning. And in particular, I really appreciated what you said, Professor Bunch. I couldn't agree more, and this is a journey, from Mexico City exactly 50 years ago. Now, it's my turn. I was invited to be in this panel, which is the making of Beijing and the platform of action. And then I will go what it has meant, all these for Mexico, and what have we undertaken, in this process, having now a feminist foreign policy. So let me first of all say thank you. It's a pleasure, and it's great to see so many women all around. And in very complex times, we really appreciate, the energy and the fact that we are here, for these 2 weeks, keeping on with our struggle, keeping on being firm and continuing the strive to have even more rights, to be able to get to the top, and to be part of the decision-making process. So it's a pleasure to be here at the American University of Beirut at the Deaf Center here in New York. And I want to thank very much my dear friend Lina for inviting me for a second time, as you said. So let me start saying that the path to Beijing started, very well in 1975 in my country, Mexico City, and as Professor Bunch said, 50 years journey from Mexico City, where the first World Cup rights of women took place. In between Mexico City and Beijing, Copenhagen in 1980 and Nairobi in 1985, hosted millions of women from more than 100 countries in events, meetings, and non-hour negotiations aimed to give shape to what an egalitarian, functional, and just world must look like for women and men, girls, and boys. So for the Mexican delegation that attended the World Conference in Beijing, the priority, besides the adoption of a political declaration on a platform of action, was imagining the process of implementing these compromises at the national level as well as a regional follow-up mechanism. Having a roadmap was a huge step, but its implementation was as important as the negotiations and discussions that ended in the two incredibly valuable deliverables of the conference in Beijing. In that sense, the strengthening of the bodies and mechanisms of the United Nations system that contribute to action-oriented decisions on behalf of women was one of the positions that Mexico defended at the conference. In Mexico, the preparations for the Beijing conference started in September of 1993 with the establishment of a national preparatory committee composed of representatives from 14 government agencies and chaired by the Minister of the Interior. The committee organized 19 thematic groups made up of nearly 200 women and men from various sectors interested in contributing to the development of the work. We held at that time nearly 300 consultations through the corresponding population councils. Likewise, excellent communication was maintained with the 250 NGOs. Women Toward Beijing was the umbrella term for these 250 organizations distributed throughout my country. The official delegation of Mexico was supposed like 46 people, as well as multilateral experts and very prominent women in public life. Actually, one of them was at the time the director of the Center for Sociological Studies at the Colegio de Mexico. And I have one of my colleagues here, from Colmex, one of the best institutions in Mexico. And the Mexican delegation also included three representatives from Women Toward Beijing and 3 other from conservative Catholic organizations. From our side, Ambassador Alpízar, who's a well-known scholar and academician, she's also a diplomat, and who have been one of the pillars of the feminist cause at the foreign ministry, was the leader around the negotiations of the political declaration. Mexico had 20 priorities for both the political declaration and the platform of action, and several of them were reflected in both documents. Additionally, we had instructions regarding general issues that arose during the conference discussions: foreign debt, development aid, environmental issues, structural and adjustment programs, human rights in general, protection during our conflict, and more. Since then, over the past 30 years, Mexico's stance on the human rights of women, young women and girls, has become increasingly progressive. And the fact that Mexico has such a progressive stance is because of the process and because of the support and the push forward of these civil society organizations. That's a fact, and that's a reality. As women's political participation has advanced in the country and more channels for civil society engagement have been opened in Mexico, we can say today that my country is recognized for defending progressive positions on issues that many others find controversial. Let's say sexual and reproductive rights, bodily autonomy, intersectionality, combating all types of gender-based violence, including intimate partner violence and digital violence. In fact, we have been, the promoters of a resolution that for the first time brought in the United Nations a resolution regarding this issue. So we have been, as I can, absolutely on top of all these issues, and we have been really champions in all the negotiation processes in the United Nations on this. At the same time, and I guess that is why my dear Lina has invited us for a second year in a row, we launched our feminist foreign policy. We launched that feminist foreign policy in 2018, and it was the first Latin American country to launch this. But first of all, for me, it's important to know what a feminist foreign policy is. I can't believe to have a feminist foreign policy if we do not have breast feeding roles, for example, of the foreign ministry, if we don't have, guardians also for children, if we don't have all instruments, international instruments and treaties signed with all our international partners, where our partners or husbands or wives or whatever, can work and come along with us, or if diplomats do not have a path that when they have small children, they can go to specific countries or work at consulates that are less demanding in terms of work. So that is thinking about women, and then we can think about empowering women and letting them move through the ladder of the foreign services in order to get to the ambassadorship postings and so on. So I would like to say that this feminist foreign policy has also, been embraced by our president herself. And I would like to share with you that, all of you know here that for the first time we have a president, a woman president in Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum. Not only that, we have for the first time a ministry, a secretariat for women, and we have our minister here exactly in New York. She has taken part in several meetings and many of the side events as well. So the president of the Supreme Court is headed by a woman currently, and female voices in Mexico are very progressive. Now, but for me, it's very important that not only we have them on the top. The important thing is that this is something central, that we look down from that. You will see that there is a vacuum or space, it's not really reflecting what we are really aiming at. We really need women to be moving through the knowledge and different areas, and see that once the president is gone, there is a possibility for another one and so on. So for Mexico, the fact to 18 plus 30 has been both domestic and foreign policy. And today, more than ever, we're committed to the Beijing plus 30 agenda, as we are aware and even concerned about the setbacks we are witnessing in the multilateral sphere. What Professor Bunch said about the division is very true. And that is why it's very important that we're sitting here together and then, take over and, keep on going and keep on striving, because that's the only way to move forward. We're also concerned that we're still far away from meeting the SDG 5 and therefore the entire 30 agenda. But as I said, we will continue to work hard, building bridges. Mexico is one of the countries that is because being in the middle in the negotiation process, not being a G7 country and not being a developed country still, we're very much in the middle of whether some sensitivities, both on one side and the other, and that let us, be able to bridge language and move forward with resolutions and declarations. Gabriela, my colleague here, she's the representative at the mission. She is responsible for gender. She plays an amazing role at the mission, and she is very much responsible, in many ways that we were able to have a political declaration, the first day of the TSW. So we will continue to work hard, because we know that it is impossible to advance as humanity without warranting the advancement of 51% of the world's population. So thank you very much, muchas gracias, Lina, and let's keep on going.
Thank you. First of all, I want to point out to the fact that having a feminist foreign policy is part of the whole, and I think that is why maybe in some places where it wasn't taken seriously, it was short-lived. So that's a very good example. And I also want to say that for us at the AB, the collaboration with Mexico has also been at the level of your diplomatic representation in the country. It has been at multi-levels. So, and I hope the presidency being the president being a woman, and also the feminist foreign policy, I think serious in this, will spill over to
neighbors. Very good. Yeah, very like for a woman president in North America. Thanks. I want to move to, we have a slight change in the program, yes. So I want to move to Chile, and she's just arrived. Minister? Thank you. No, sorry. No, we haven't. I mistake because we understand that this seminar are defense starts 1 hour. I'm delighted to introduce Minister Gloria de la Fuente, who has been with us virtually at the UV last year when we were having an event for also on feminist foreign policy. Chile has joined also to the countries who have seriously adopted feminist foreign policy, and we're happy to have you with us in person this time. I'm, as somebody who's coming from the MENA region, first of all, welcome for the second time in AUB. It's always amazing to see feminists in politics. That's very unusual for our countries until now. So I'm very happy to have you with us, Alicia, and we're waiting for our colleague also from Finland. So over to you, and I want to ask you to.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Sorry again, but I am so glad to stay here because it's important for us. Chile is the second country in Latin America and the first in South America to launch the feminist foreign policy. And we understand that it's a strong commitment to our government, but not only our government, our state and foreign vision about our foreign policy, because we understand that egalitarian gender equality is important for us in Chile. But in this government, we launch the feminist foreign policy because we need more efforts about our achievement in our government. And in 2023, we launched the feminist foreign policy. We identified 8 points, and I read you what is these points in our feminist foreign policy: human rights and strengthening democracy, eradicating and eliminating gender-based violence, empowerment and create a representation of women, peace and security according to the resolution of 1325, trade and gender, climate change and gender, digital science, technology and innovation agenda, and comprehensive care system. That is the point, and we built this agenda with the social civil and with academic, with our conversation, our minister and ministry, and we understand this point is the main important in our foreign policy, in our agenda. We now have an action plan with different points in different areas in our feminist foreign policy. For example, multilateral agenda, we have we support a resolution about care system in different organizations. For example, in trade, we support agreements about our free commercial issues with segments of the gender equality points, and we are the first country. We have a trade of commercial in different countries with put the gender equality like a promotion of the gender participation of genders, the women in the trade, and climate change, of course. And climate change, we understand, and we work in different levels. First level, multilateral issues, bilateral issues too. We have a lot of MOUs about gender equality, for example, with Spain, with Mexico and other countries that have a feminist foreign policy too. And the consular issues, that is so important in the work of the Ministry of Foreign Policy, because we attend citizens abroad about that and the necessities about that. And we have special programs about the women abroad, victim of violence, and we have attended these initiatives. And consular trade, and we understand that is and cooperation too. Also, is so important cooperation, and our view about the cooperation, for example, with the women in the situation of conflicts in Palestine, now Ukraine. We put our cooperation and humanitarian aid in for direct to the women and girls victims of conflict in different parts of the world. And we understand that this strong efforts, we have like as I said, an action plan. This action plan will present in the next weeks the results about the action plan. And we understand, and we will create the women gender division in our ministry, because we need to not only put our efforts now, we need to project this effort, and that is so important for it. And maybe this has summarized about what we will do, but thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, as I was saying with our dear friend Alicia, we're very happy also that the English cooperate with your diplomatic mission in Yemen around this, and also be able to kind of work with you as allies, as countries that have standard feminist foreign policy, but really with metrics, with ways to measure that. So thank you for being allies. We're really happy you're with us. I want to turn directly to a very dear friend for many of us here, actually, and somebody who's been instrumental in the next phases of Beijing, +25, generation equality. Lopa Banerjee, you're always welcome, and you're basically a dear friend of AUV and of all of us here. So please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Lina. And like Alicia, I also very much look forward in the madness of CSW. I really look forward to this event, and thank you for inviting UN Women for a second time for this conversation. Thank you, Alicia, so much for that lovely history. Charlotte, as always, and Minister, thank you for Chile's leadership in the world, in your country, and for everything that you're doing to hold the line at this critical time. Friends, this conversation takes place at an extraordinary moment, when the world is more equal for women and girls than it has ever been, and yet 1 in 4 countries across the world report backlash against women's rights, undermining the implementation of commitments that can unlock equality, rights, and protection for all women and girls. As Charlotte mentioned, women's rights are human rights in 1995. What the Beijing Platform for Action did through that was a seismic shift in how the world recognizes, advocates for, institutionalizes, and legislates gender equality across peace, militarization, political economy, and the environment, and climate. And so this is why 3 decades on, it remains the most comprehensive and transformative global agenda for the advancement of gender equality and women's rights. And we have significant achievements since in the last 30 years. Between 1995 and 2024, 1,531 legal reforms have been introduced to advance gender equality. The proportion of women in parliament has doubled since 1995. 88% of countries across the world have passed laws and established services to end violence against women and girls. Most countries have banned discrimination in employment, and more countries than ever are considering the impact of environmental degradation on women and girls, reflecting gender equality in their climate action plans. And yet, women continue to face disparities in economic participation. The gender labor force gap in participation has remained stagnant for 20 years. They continue to face gaps in political representation. At the current rate of progress, gender parity will not be achieved before 2063. We continue to, in spite of the fact that 88% of countries across the world have passed legislation to end violence against women and girls, 736 million women and girls across the world are subject to physical and sexual violence by an intimate partner or from a non-partner. So, but, remarkably, and of course, one of the most critical aspects, which is that in spite of all this, the resources to advance gender equality are infrequent. But remarkably, amidst this, there is hope. This week, at the opening of CSW, the member states of the United Nations adopted the Beijing +30 political declaration, reaffirming that gender equality and women's rights remain a consensus agenda among member states. Thank you so much to the member states in this room for making that possible. This is really a remarkable moment at this point in time of the backlash that we are seeing. Thank you very, very much to all the member states. Yeah.
Thanks.
And because of this, what we have seen, because of these 30 years, what we have seen very clearly in terms of the implementation of the Platform for Action and the fact that it has this arc of the political economy across it, that 25% of member states recognize that integrating gender-responsive measures in foreign policy is a key pathway to accelerate gender equality and promote the rights of women and girls. And this is not a surprise, given that over the last decade, we have seen governments adopting and implementing feminist foreign policies, whether they call it feminist foreign policy or not, but the measures by which foreign policy decisions are influencing national domestic agendas, but also global trade and multilateral agendas. That said, the intention of feminist foreign policies that they should dismantle bias, dismantle colonial hierarchies, so that women and girls in all their diversity can lead in their countries and communities, so that women can be in positions of decision making. There are gaps that remain here. Women have, as a result of feminist foreign policies, we are seeing more women in decision making in multilateral space, and we are seeing that. However, the representation of women in national governments, at local governments, we haven't seen that level of progress with the imposition of feminist foreign policies in countries. But most importantly, 2 points which are absolutely central as we look at the value and the promise of feminist foreign policies. 1, women's rights organizations are at the forefront of any change that we need to see. They have been forever, not just over the last 30 years, but leading to Mexico and the 4 World Conferences, transnational feminist movements, local feminist movements. This is the lifeblood of the gender equality agenda and the gender equality movement. And women's rights organizations, local community women's organizations and young feminist groups are being starved of the resources that they need, the political space that they need, and the fiscal territory that they need to do their work. One of the critical aspects of feminist foreign policy must be to centralize the deployment of resources where they are needed most in the hands of women's rights and feminist organizations. The second thought, feminist foreign policies must recognize that war and conflict are at the greatest expense of women and girls and are the biggest reason why we have not advanced on gender equality as much as we should have in the promise that Beijing laid out 30 years ago. And that transformative peace building with women at the center of the table has to be a key deliverable if we are going to advance anything in terms of moving forward on this agenda. And so as we enter the second decade of feminist foreign policies, we have to be looking at the appropriate accountability mechanisms that will enable this and that will strengthen the relevant institutions within countries and in the global and multilateral and regional spaces that will facilitate this implementation over time, so that we are looking at all areas of foreign policy, including trade, diplomacy, migration, and all of these other spaces. And the implementation of feminist foreign policy is supported by data. In terms of how data can, we know this. We know that it's the collection and the dissemination of data that advances gender equality. And in the same way, that is what is going to advance accountable feminist foreign policy. UN Women has taken some steps in contributing to this agenda, and we do this through three key areas. One is gender data, evidence, and knowledge to help build bridge the data gaps on the intersection of gender equality and the various domains of foreign policy. Second is through equal representation, to promote the increased representation of women in all their diversity across the various tracks of diplomacy, recognizing diplomacy as a major instrument of foreign policy, and that equal representation is a key component of good governance at all levels of national, regional, and global governance. And the third, of course, is gender mainstreaming across all areas of foreign policy, most importantly, that which is related to military and trade negotiations. And to come back to that, to one of the points that you raised, Charlotte, Alicia, you raised, Minister, you also spoke about this. Sustained progress on the vision of the Beijing Declaration requires relentless advocacy, continuous monitoring, and unwavering commitment and collective action. To the governments here who are promoting feminist foreign policy, I want to say, if there's one thing that you will do in terms of looking at where that feminist foreign policy focuses, it is to look at ensuring that foreign policy prioritizes the investment in gender equality, including investment in women's movements. Without resourced, politically supported women's movements, we are not going to be able to advance the agenda.
Thank you so much, Lopa. Always a pleasure to hear you and to learn from you, and very motivating. Thank you so much. Many of us around the table or in this room, when maybe not overwhelming majority, have been in Beijing. And I'm very happy to have with us somebody who was a victim and then is an elected member of parliament. Ms. Tuula Haatainen from Finland. The floor is yours, and it's really lovely to have a fellow who was in Beijing. Similarly, my friend Anita and Charlotte, Lydia, Patricia. Actually, Anita, given you my bell at the bottom. Good. Still going strong from Beijing. My name is Tuula Haatainen, and I come from Finland.
And I have been working with equality issues almost all my life, all my career, and I have to say that a great deal of things that happened during this time. Now I'm a member of parliament, and I have served many years also as a minister. I was in the former government, Minister for Employment. Sanna Marin was the prime minister in that government. We were 12 women out of 19 in that government. And still this share continues in the new one that is not led by social democratic prime minister, but is a conservative prime minister. So in Finland we have a tradition quite long that we really want to keep the parity in political decision making in parliament and in governments. I'm also currently preparing reports for the Assembly of Council of Europe regarding equality body and parliamentary cooperation. So we were in Beijing, and at that time I was mother of 2 young children, and I can say that the conference, the huge NGO forum there, women coming from all parts of the world to talk about feminism, to talk about women's rights and experiences that they have had. And I'll never forget that experience. And I have to say that there was really the hope for women and girls in the air. Our head of the delegation was our foreign minister at that time, Ms. Tarja Halonen, and after 5 years after Beijing, she was elected the first female president of Finland. So all this, I don't know if it is Beijing, but it was the atmosphere that women have to come to power. And women's organizations worked also very much together. During the Beijing time, I was leading our women's organization, the political organization, so the Democratic Women. I was general secretary, so I'm like working with my hands. They're also in Beijing pouring. So after Beijing, many reforms have come through in Finland and in Europe and globally. And my feeling is that Beijing empowered women, but it gave the tool to demand new reforms and not to accept their own explanations why these reforms are not possible. Myself, I have been working for legislation in criminal law to safeguard women from perpetrators, making rape mines punishable, and ensure shelters to victims. And we have been campaigning with women activists for the right of public daycare to every child under school age, and also to share the parental leave. And all this progress, I have to say, has been possible only because women have worked together. We women's organizations, over the political borders, we made an umbrella organization, and we were working on certain issues that we all share the same aim. So then we could get it through also in parliament, because the parliamentarians also started to work together. My background is in healthcare, and I have done my social degree, my master degree in social sciences, and somehow that is why I feel that all the decisions, legislation we do, it has to be meaningful and mean concrete change in women's lives. We need institutions. They are very important, and also legislation to tackle the structural discrimination that we are facing in our society. It is hidden, we can't see it, but by institutions, equality institutions, we can make reform that is also continue. And we need social reforms so that women's right to combine work and family is possible. We need legislation to guarantee women's right to decide the number of childbirth. All this in my country and in many countries in Europe, we have taken this for granted. But now we can see that in many countries, this is under the risk. So it is our duty to stop this negative political movement, anti-gender and anti-abortion movements in the world, because these are the human rights and women's rights are human rights. I think that making women visible at all levels, on local level and state level and everywhere, and women's cooperation is the key to the change. And Beijing encourage also more women to hold leadership positions. And now in Finland we have 46% women in parliament. Though we have still lots of things to do, where lots of work remains to be done. And at the moment, we can see that women's participation in the world, that also in European countries, it has in many countries stagnated. And that is what we should look for. I was in the IPU, Interparliamentary Union, talking about this with others, and this is frightening if we don't go forward. So Finland is also a member of the European Union, and the European Union is 27 states altogether, and it has the right to make legislation that the member states have to follow. And the European Union has done a lot. In 2000, the European Union decided the Charter of Fundamental Rights. It was adopted then, and it emphasized the gender equality and non-discrimination as a fundamental right. Then the European Union has done roadmaps for gender equality on all areas of life, and one issue is a strategy on narrowing the wage gap and increasing women's participation at labor markets. During the 20th, the European Union has in its strategy focused on promoting gender equality by combating violence against women and also narrowing the wage gap. So when I look at European Union development, gender equality has improved during these 30 years. And these legislation and strategies and directives, they are laws that have to be implemented, have helped reduce the gender differences and promoted equality in all areas of the life. And of course, there are still challenges, but I think the most important is that European Union is committed to promoting equality, and it is strong and continuous. When we go back to Beijing, I think three points from there. I think one of the key issues is economic empowerment. So economic independence is the backbone for individual freedom. So women's possibility to go to work is dependent on the public services, and of course the childcare, low cost, public, or that it comes universal right to childcare. It's really prerequisite for women's participation in the labor market. And in Finland, this has been a success case. The cost by kindergarten is very affordable. It can be free, and really it helps women. Then the second, education and health. As a result, there has been significant improvements in girls' access to education and women's health services. Third, combating violence against women. We can see that Beijing also meant a lot in Europe. European Istanbul Convention is one of the most important achievements of the Council of Europe.
and it is against violence against women. For the violence against, no, it works against the violence against women. Right. So despite this advancement, the challenges that we are facing now and we have been discussing here, they are the stereotypes, unequal power structures, gaps in policy implementation, and there are really serious threats. Crises and wars that we are witnessing in Ukraine and in Gaza-Israel situation. And there is climate change, the hate speech, attacks towards LGBTQ plus people, and violence against women, especially the social media, deepfake videos, anti-gender movements, and all this. So they really are now making the risk for the development. So we have to be awake, and we have to strongly defend women's rights and human rights. To younger generations, I want to say that there is hope, and we have to remember that women make the change. So before I came here to here to New York, on Women's Day we had a demonstration in Helsinki, Women's March, and there was over 10,000 women, mainly young women, demanding loudly for gender equality. So that made me really think of Beijing. And I have to say that as grandmother of two small, beautiful children, when I saw the faces of the bold, young marching women, that made me trust. I have to say that game is not over. We will win. Thank you. Yes, definitely. The game is not over. Definitely we will win. I want to hand over the rest of this segment to Charlotte. We are a little bit over time. We will try to do what they do on the plane, to not go over speed. So,
Thank you. Well, it's my great pleasure to introduce our next two speakers. Anita Nayar, who is my colleague and friend, and who many of you may know and others should know, that Anita had the job for the Beijing conference of coordinating all the changes and additional language that all of the feminist groups wanted around the world. So we were all sending Anita constantly our changes, our suggestions, and she was trying to coordinate us into some kinds of agreements that we could actually get into the document, and amazingly we did. So this is a genius. And Anita continues to work on the implementation of all the ideas through an organization called Reasons Refocus that is focused on research on economic and environmental issues that we were just talking about is crucial. So I give you Anita.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. I stand on your shoulders. And so many of you in this room. Thank you, Lina, for convening us. Really, even the conceiving of this event across generations and across sectors is something only you could have conceived of from that legacy of work. So thank you. I'm really humbled by this invitation. I'd like to situate the Beijing conference in the era of global UN conferences of the 1990s, right, which includes the 1992 UN Conference on Environment and Development in Rio, the 1993 World Conference on Human Rights in Vienna, the 1994 International Conference on Population and Development in Cairo, and the 1995 World Summit on Social Development in Copenhagen. Women's movements, as we've heard, particularly from the Global South, played a major force in contesting and shaping these policy processes alongside other social, political, economic forces that were also at play. And as government representatives to each of the conference came from different line ministries, they tended to compartmentalize the issues, if you want. And feminists had to not only fight to ensure that the agreements were infused with a women's human rights perspective, they also had to prevent government amnesia from each of the conferences. So we had to demand and that they link and build on the agreements made at each successive conference. And that culminated in a mechanism that Charlotte mentioned that I coordinated called the Linkage Caucus. And that was the mechanism that successfully influenced the Beijing Platform for Action, where we affirmed and elaborated on the gains that were made on women's rights in Vienna, reproductive and sexual health and reproductive rights in Cairo, sustainable consumption and development in Rio, and of course, call for poverty eradication in Copenhagen. But despite these major advances, there were significant paradoxes that I think are really essential to recognize and learn from as we contest the dynamics of the current context. And I'll just name a few at the nexus of gender and economic justice. In 1995, there were 4 major wins that I'll point to. First, we won a commitment to poverty eradication and a need to restructure and reformulate macroeconomic policies to achieve this. That's in the text. But the actions and the targets remained at the micro level. And they didn't really tackle the structural problems that were really underlying the feminization of poverty. So the emphasis was on poor women's access to micro, small, and medium credit. And these same micro-level policy solutions are being peddled by the World Trade Organization today. While in 1995, they saw gender as literally irrelevant and wouldn't even engage in a dialogue with feminists at that time, today they deploy gender and women's empowerment as a means to open markets and expand an unjust trade system. Secondly, we won commitments to ensure that the international financial institutions and their policies would integrate social development and gender equality, also in the text. But there is an absence of national and international mechanisms that would actually monitor these institutions. So today we see, with very minor differences between them, that the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund have effectively pinkwashed their policy prescriptions. So the struggle is actually harder today. We're not arguing for gender to be relevant anymore. We're arguing about the content of what they mean by gender and how those policies are impacting women negatively, even while they have a gendered approach. And that's a much harder fight today. Third, we won a commitment to the goal of full employment, a remarkable achievement. But the means emphasized to ensure that full employment was through liberalizing trade and investment. So the role of governments in generating employment was limited to investment in human resources and entrepreneurial activity. I mean, full employment has always been an incredibly politically charged proposition. So it shows you how hard feminists fought to actually win this in the agreements. But with today's global turn toward the right wing, including in this country, there's a massive political opposition to full employment because of the economic importance of maintaining a certain level of unemployment, which plays into their governance agendas. Finally, we won strong commitments to uphold women's economic human rights. But governments remain committed to market-based solutions. And in the context of privatization and diminishing state power, governments are not really proving effective at safeguarding human rights or holding corporations accountable. So today, what I call the planet wreckers in this country are pursuing the same agenda of privatizing public goods, dismantling the education department and healthcare, and replacing them for-profit services. So I think, inspired by what we did in the 90s, I think we need to return to a shared idea of the commons. if we're going to find solutions to these structural issues. In the 1990s, we looked at what constitutes security, not as a matter of militarization, but to think about security in another way, interlinking economic, ecological, and gender justice. We took time to acknowledge each other's existence, to hear each other, and to agree on a shared reality. It took time to bridge these divides and to arrive at these understandings. I mean, there was, as we heard, months of work organizing at the national, the regional, and before we even engaged with our states and mostly women delegates in the intergovernmental processes. The importance of multilateralism to build consensus with a large majority of states from the global south and the north is deeply under threat, with globally growing anti-multilateralism, anti-gender, and a right-wing agenda. But as feminists, we need to fight the fascists and reclaim this ground. The rise of nationalism comes with power grabs, resource grabs, land grabs, attacks on gender justice. It's regressive in every way. And we need to counter this by gathering, by convening, and by returning to feminist principles of care. I mean, what do we mean by care? Not looking away, paying attention, caring for the planet against private accumulation, recognizing our interdependence between peoples and ecosystems, and building all this into governance agendas. So that's the call.
Thank you, Anita, for that powerful agenda going forward. Our next speaker, I could give you about 20 minutes and about her life, but she is also a powerful academic activist who has crossed over NGO and government lines all her life, as well as being the president of Mariam College in the Philippines, and very involved in the follow-up to Beijing through that. But most importantly, I want a round of applause for the woman who was the chair of the Commission on the Status of Women at the time of the Beijing conference and shepherded us through the Beijing platform for action. Patricia Licuanan.
Thank you, Charlotte. Let me start with what the Fourth World Conference on Women accomplished. Even before we reached Beijing, the Women's Conference had already achieved one of its main objectives, raising the level of awareness and discussion of gender issues globally. The Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action went through a 3-year process of consultation, discussion, and negotiation at national, regional, and global levels. 5 regional preparatory meetings with parallel NGO forums were organized by the Economic Commissions, with a regional platform for action coming out of each. The conference itself was different, by far the largest UN conference, with estimates of 45 to 15,000 people at the government meeting and the NGO forum. The partnership with NGOs throughout the process, though not without tension, was unparalleled. The conference covered familiar ground and reinforced old concerns raised during the UN Decade on Women, such as the feminization of poverty, economic participation, health, education, political participation, and human rights. But most important, the World Conference broke new ground. Among the significant breakthroughs were, it elevated the issue of violence against women from a private domestic concern to the level of public policy. It acknowledged women's unremunerated work at home, in family farms, in small businesses, and in family farms, and in small business enterprises. It reaffirmed women's rights as human rights and brought women's sexual rights within the parameters of human rights. It affirmed the rights of the girl child, addressed issues of discrimination against her, and sought protection for her from all sorts of abuse and exploitation. It recognized women migrant workers as a vulnerable group and ensured their rights. The first time women migrant workers, in addition to simply women migrants, were so recognized. And the platform, with its 12 critical areas of concern, is the most comprehensive and progressive global blueprint for women's rights and empowerment. So when the draft Beijing platform and declaration, the Declaration and Platform for Action was approved by consensus at 4:45 a.m. on September 15, 1995. The applause was thunderous. There was so much promise, so much hope. Since Beijing, the UN has conducted regular reviews of the implementation of the Beijing Platform for Action, Beijing +5, +10, +15, +20, +25, and now Beijing +30. Reviews over the years have revealed disappointing results with progress far short of the ambitious goals of Beijing. While some Beijing promises were kept, many were broken. The platform's implementation faces serious threats, diminishing resources, misogyny and sexism, and shrinking the democratic space, even in countries that were challenging women's empowerment in Beijing. Today, as I reflect over the past 30 years of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, what have I learned? Many things for sure, but for this afternoon, let me share one major lesson: the importance of tenacity, steadfastness, and passion in order to move forward the implementation of the Platform for Action, and where this will come from. Over the 30 long years as Beijing, I have seen governments come and go. I have witnessed them blow hot and cold on issues, specifically on women's issues. I have watched personalities change. But over the 30 years, NGOs have remained constant. Women's organizations pushing for the specific area of concern on the platform, and even the women themselves, 30 years older, but still fighting the good fight with enduring tenacity and passion. Some of them I see around the room. We must consider how to systematically strengthen the role of NGOs in the UN processes. In the Philippines, the women's movement refers to the Bibingka principle in the work of gender equality and women's empowerment. Bibingka is a popular Philippine dessert, a rice cake cooked by hot coal below and hot coal above the pan of cake batter. Thus, the work is propelled by environmental tap in progressive and enlightened policy and leadership, and fire at the bottom, it well-organized, dynamic, and courageous NGOs. There is need to revive and revitalize the feminist spirit of Beijing. Yes. Beijing is not just history. It's not just a set of exciting memories. 30 years ago, at the UN Fourth World Conference on Women, and through the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, governments, United Nations, and civil society committed themselves to action for equality, development, and peace. And those commitments still have to be met. Yes, it was.
Thank you so much. It's almost impossible to have summarized what you said, but you brought together really powerful pieces of an otherwise very unfit history, and basically on how and why we are here at this point in time. We're going to skip the Q&A, the 3 minutes Q&A, so that we go straight to our next segment. I'm going to invite, thank you, Charlotte, thank you, everybody. Thank you for all your insights, and thank you for, I'm not sure how to call it 30 years later, but the spirit was still here. Exactly. Correct. And I was still here because you were cameras me. And thank you so much.
So I think we all feel in our times and probably after those have so I just from the panelists want to thank all the panelists, and I'm very happy to be taking us to the second panel from the Beijing Platform for Action to Feminist Foreign Policy, where we're going to be joined by four amazing activists. We have Dr. Kristen Ali Eglinton, from the founder and executive director of Fuente Foundation, Lydia Thompson, the founder and CEO of Feminist Foreign Policy Collaborative, Nisren Habib, a Syrian activist and the manager of the Feminist Research Unit at Women Now for Development, and María, Tepichin, researcher and director of the Center for Gender Studies at Colegio de México, and I need the effort to pronounce it in Spanish. So thank you, everyone. In the interest of time, I'm going to be asking all the amazing panelists to try to limit the intervention to 4 minutes if possible. And I'm going to start with Kristen, Lyric, and Nisren. It's a true privilege to have all three of you with us. You're all global activists. You're involved in operationalizing various instruments, including the Beijing Platform for Action and Feminist Foreign Policy, to support your important and critical work to move communities, policies, and various places towards gender equality. So in 4 minutes instead of the initial 7 minutes, if possible, could you reflect on how a tool such as feminist foreign policy is necessary to align talk and intention with action? And shall we start with Kristen?
Yes, thank you so much. I timed this perfectly to 7 minutes, so I speak a little bit quicker. Public speaking is not my forte, so here we go. So good afternoon, Your Excellencies, distinguished panelists, esteemed colleagues, feminists, and dear friends. My deepest thanks to our host, the Asfari Institute and the American University of Beirut, and to dear Lina for bringing us together in this safe space, and to all of you for your tireless commitment to feminist activism and civil society. I'm extremely honored to be here. I'm an applied social scientist and a feminist ethnographer. I'm also the co-founder and executive director of an international NGO, Footage Foundation, that works with women in all their diversity, as well as with historically and structurally marginalized populations, including queer communities in crisis contexts, particularly in Ukraine and across Eurasia. Before I begin, as we all know, feminist foreign policy did not emerge in a vacuum. It stands, as we know, on the foundation of decades of feminist activism, on the voices, struggles, and strategies of those who came before us, so many in this room, and we honor that legacy. I want to answer the question today by illustrating a particular kind of feminist foreign policy, one that is deeply rooted in praxis. That is, on how FFPs take shape and action in lived experiences and on the ground. FFPs for us at Footage must include 3 aspects: feminist research, diplomacy, and compassion. These are the constituents of FFP for us. They are FFPs in action, and they are the means to drive it forward. And I'm going to explain this briefly again. I begin with the first aspect, feminist research, and I ground the rest of this discussion in my own and Footage's history. At Footage, we work with communities to co-design and co-implement compassion-driven, evidence-based feminist research interventions. We use participatory arts-based methods, building bespoke technologies to gain insights and catalyze transformation. Our focus is on gender-based violence and forced displacement with the world's most forgotten communities. I co-founded Footage at the University of Cambridge 15 years ago with 4 other women social scientists when we saw firsthand how the social science methods we were using, such as anthropological film, went far beyond generating data. As people spoke with me and shared images, I saw that feminist principles of voice, radical inclusion, and collaboration inspired real, tangible social change. Our feminist research methods generate data and are trauma-informed, prioritizing safety and transparency. We foster safe spaces while breaking down hierarchies between researchers and those we serve. There is no research at footage for research's sake. Research generates rigorous data and must bring about transformation and healing. By connecting data-rich and lived experiences to policy, our research bridges the micro, the realities on the ground, with the macro, the nation-state structures shaping them. Moving to the second aspect, diplomacy, we build on our feminist research interventions through what we call a dialogue diplomacy, creating spaces for reciprocal dialogue rooted in shared human experience. We prioritize community voices over state-centric models and formal negotiations. Our work is shaped by 12 U.S. State Department Public Diplomacy Awards, which has focused on preventing gender and identity-based violence in intolerant geographies. Though recent cuts to foreign aid and DEI have ended our funding, we remain committed to supporting communities facing anti-gender and anti-rights movements globally. This diplomacy of dialogue starts with us as researchers, activists, and advocates. Diplomacy is person to person, soul to soul. Real change happens when we recognize our shared humanity through stories, experiences, joy, and suffering, and only then as communities, and only then as nation states and institutions. Finally, at the heart of our mission is the science of compassion, which we see as empathy and action rooted in relationality, solidarity, and generosity. Compassion, including self-compassion, transforms individuals, communities, and geographies, yet it is often overlooked in development, diplomacy, and policymaking. It involves understanding others' pain while extending kindness to ourselves. Research, including our own, shows that compassion bridges our shared humanity, deepens connections, and profoundly impacts physical and mental health. It is often dismissed as idealistic, but compassion is, in fact, a strategic and necessary force in advancing feminist foreign policy. Through our methods, we nurture compassion as a tool for fostering connection and reducing shame, which is one of the lowest frequencies on the scales of human consciousness, and arguably where disease at the individual level and the level of nation-state take hold and thrive. I want to offer one fast, clear example of feminist foreign policy in action through our FemSMS program. It is trauma-informed text messaging service providing vital information to women in all our diversity, humanitarians, and historically oppressed communities, such as queer communities impacted by the war in Ukraine. Launched after Russia's full-scale invasion, FemSMS combats information poverty, including misinformation by sharing resources on gender-based violence, trafficking, and mental health. It embodies our feminist research principles, which we include as feminist research, dialogue, diplomacy, and compassion, core pillars of feminist foreign policy. First, feminist research. FemSMS is built through an iterative human-centered design process, centering recipient knowledge and lived experience and ensuring messages are co-created for relevance and responsiveness. Second, moving into diplomacy, FemSMS fosters participatory communication, creating direct channels between affected population, humanitarian actors, and broader social support networks. Over the last 30-plus months, we have sent over 13,000 messages to 900 recipients, reaching an additional 10,000 plus through other digital platforms. 80% of our messages are forwarded by recipients to family and friends. This exchange of information demonstrates dialogue diplomacy as a powerful mechanism for collective action. Finally, the third pillar is compassion, which is at the core of FemSMS. Messages reduce isolation, foster solidarity, and empower recipients beyond conventional crisis communications. Crafted with a trauma-informed lens, messages are set in a yoke of compassion, acknowledging the shame and difficulty that surround these topics and making it easier for recipients to access and act on critical resources. To close, feminist foreign policies must be more than aspirational. They must drive real, measurable, data-driven change. This means centering on lived experiences, creating sustained dialogue, and centering humanity's most precious values, including compassion, solidarity, and genuine connection. Thank you, and I look forward to further discussion.
thank you, Robert, and turning forward the work that you're doing in presenting the Massieu with the Massieu from data politics, and then they move to our second panelist. Lydia, how do you collaborate to make sure that the policies, the feminist foreign policies are actually consistent with the actions and the other things? Thank you.
Thank you to the organizers and to all the friends and partners in the audience. It's my pleasure to lead the Feminist Foreign Policy Collaborative and to coordinate with many of you something called the Global Partner Network for Feminist Foreign Policy, which is just what it sounds like, a global network in which all of the countries who have announced feminist foreign policies and all the activists and academics who are seeking to shape those policies come together in a spirit of open exchange, learning, and trying to iterate this feeling forward for a vision of a inclusive foreign policy, one that counts as its principles that process policymaking is as important as the policy product itself. One that certainly is co-created with the groups who are on the receiving end of those foreign policies, and one that is brave and isn't afraid of the hard issues, which is getting to be, I acknowledge, a tolerant chance by the day. I also had a 7-minute very smart intervention about all of our great policy papers with what is feminist foreign policy and how do you do it, and we don't have time for that, so I'll just refer you to our website for those resources and give you in my 4 minutes 4 moments from my career. And we're trying to pick up the through line of the aunties in the last channel who were in Beijing. I was not, but involved sat at their knees and thanking them for their wisdom and wished for another conference on England, even as I understand that doesn't make any sense from an intergovernmental negotiating document. So I came to New York as a young activist around the time that many of you were organizing for a UN entity on women. There were the 4 smaller entities. Now we're consolidating power. We're building institutions. We have our mother frameworks. We're moving into institution building. Let's go. Great. So that was something that was very much still in an orientation of an upward trajectory. We are building progress in one year, and to a certain extent, in my own idealistic mind, inevitable. Moment 2. No Fifth World Conference on Women. What do? We're feminists. We innovate. We work outside systems that constrain us and undermine our principles. And so together, the UN, the champion countries, the activists, and the private sector, a few of them, co-created the Generation Equality Foreign process and took that moment and that celebration outside of the intergovernmental process for obvious reasons, crowded in pledging and expanded thematic focus areas beyond those we had in Beijing to include climate, to include something called feminist leadership and movement. And that is where the second moment in which I started situating my work of defining and understanding what is a feminist foreign policy. Is there a gold star definition approach that the bureaucrats in government who are staring down the challenges and the opposition all the time, and the idealists in the movement who are always pushing and hopefully always will be pushing for something better, could agree on and move toward? And that is our definition and our framework for feminist foreign policy. And I think that has been the recognition, at least for my work, that at some point we have to go country by country, state by state, policy by policy. 2014 was the moment where Sweden gave us our first officially, explicitly feminist foreign policy. In the 10 years since then, my work has been to understand what does that mean, to diversify that cohort, and our high water mark was 16 countries in all UN regions. There has been enough time now for backsliding. Sweden has abandoned, but even so, we have a regional collaboration on feminist foreign policy. We partnered with Argentina to host the first Latin America Regional Summit on feminist foreign policy, an event that we hosted yesterday evening with many of you in the Church Center. I looked across that room and it was exactly the world. And that was not the case in 2014. I would talk to governments about, Sweden's got this feminist foreign policy. What about you? And there would be a laugh, response, and oh, that's just a niche Nordic thing. That's not for us. And you all working together have decolonized that. It's still in process. You have globalized it. You have pushed your way in. And we now have victories in the form of the French feminist foreign policy that was launched on Friday. There was a visibly exhausted French bureaucrat who said, yes. Well, we know now that we have to do this in a feminist process. And that means a lot of work with civil society. And, we're ready for the fight. And we're hosting the next ministerial meeting on this. And it is a small space. It is hopefully still a growing space, a champions-only space. It is a space of self-reflection. The Dutch Feminist Foreign Policy commissioned a review of racism in the foreign ministry as one of its first acts. The German Feminist Foreign Policy talked about the importance of building a feminist reflex and acknowledged that their feminist foreign policy would be a working document that would continue to evolve and that they would benefit from learning. The Canadians have been very interested in learnings in their process as well. Colombia last year gave us the world's first pacifist feminist foreign policy. Liberia, Mexico, and Canada once have survived elections and continued their feminist foreign policy. This is our final moment in my 4 moments. I don't know what the next moment looks like, but I know on the basis of that room yesterday and this room today that we're still at the bridge. Thanks.
The feminist act, how that feminist foreign policy manifests and you work together.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity to be here, to hear all these really powerful experiences and inspired experiences. Now I'm here representing my organization that's called Women Now for Development. Was started in 2012 as a grassroots movement and initiative in light of the revolution that started in 2011. And definitely we are proud now that we and the community, we are communities, we are working with developed and expanded our understanding, our knowledge, our practices. So we are not just performing as just programs or serving just like emergency needs. No, it's more like about strategic thinking, how the world inside Syria, outside Syria, and all the places where they and their communities have to be displaced because of the conflict that was in Syria. Not conflict, but really the conflict for the revolution that turned into war in Syria. So I'm proud that women now and all that are solicited, the women that we've been working with, and we are from them. We are all the women now activists, Syrian women. Our families are in the same situation. Some of us are like tried hard to be in the traditional or mainstreaming platforms to talk about our causes, enforcing or reporting ourselves. And we are coming from communities that witnessed the first-hand the stating consequences of the current policies that prescribing their strategic purchase over human rights and women's rights.
But for decades, like the rhetoric of gender equality and women's rights and field rights sometimes came like on the expensive our life and our community's lives, safety, dignity, and strength. But why and how? Because most of the time, and these foreign policies were imposed on us, not looking into the context where they are dealing with, not using the language of the culture of these contexts, and sometimes negatively impact other peoples. So fighting for more gender rights and gender equality by using or copying some of the mechanisms that they are using in other or their context from ours, which caused the communities to abuse it even before knowing what's the need of it. So definitely we feel the necessity of the concept itself of feminist foreign policies, which, as you said, like we need a feminist thing and process, especially if this means that the needs of the each context will come from people on the ground, from women, from human rights defenders, especially if this means that feminist policies or foreign policies also will not be separate from political views and perspectives. Because feminism cannot be separate from politics, and this is what we all were and still fighting for. And this is what we are seeing, unfortunately, throughout. And it's very necessary for us and for everyone to see women and all marginalized groups are on the table, not just fighting for women and gender rights, to be on all the tables in negotiations, political process of other countries. This is what we are looking for from the foreign, from the feminist foreign policy, that we should participate in forming it and not just to see it in and the last thing that I will add here, that now in Syria, although I welcome this day in the news that Israel bombed down so today, more civilians were found to be killed in the posted in Syria by the Syrian massacre that took place there. The new constitution, I'm not sure if it's right or wrong, but the declaration, the constitutional declaration that the religious of the president, which is man president, should be established. Although that the first thing meant our religion was to not have anti-religious or gender excluded in the constitution. So despite all these frustrating facts that I was dealing today, we are in a moment of hope now in Syria. And we need all your support to support the civil society voice, women voice, human defender voices, to be part or every negotiation to Syria. Up to now, as you can see, just Nisren and military commanders are negotiating our lives, deciding how our state will be and how the political process will continue. And this is definitely what we are looking for, and no one is looking for this, because definitely they will not be able to represent any of our needs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It is an honor to participate in this event, and I appreciate very much the invitation to present relevant progress that has been made in feminist research agendas over the past 30 years in relation to Beijing platform of action by feminist foreign policy. For over 3 decades, feminist research has been at the forefront of knowledge production on gender equality. As the feminist movement continues to evolve, research must address both persistent and emerging challenges. The presentation is structured around major conceptual shifts in gender studies, the evolution of research agendas, and the intersection of these issues with feminist foreign policy. The adoption of the Beijing Platform for Action, as we know, marked a turning point in global commitments to gender equality. Since then, feminist research has generated essential quantitative and quantitative insights into the production and reproduction of gender inequalities. Feminist movements, international organizations, and academia have engaged in a dynamic dialogue leading to significant advances in policy and practice. As we look ahead, it is crucial to identify the research questions that can further the feminist agenda and enhance the impact of feminist foreign policy. To begin, I will argue that conceptual shift in gender research. Over the past 3 decades, gender studies have undergone significant conceptual transformations that have influenced public policy and feminist progress. 4 key shifts stand out. First shift, from victimhood to agency. A fundamental transformation in gender research has been the shift from viewing women as mere victims of pressure to recognizing them as agents of change. This perspective empowers women by highlighting our capacity for resistance, leadership, and social transformation. Early feminist frameworks often conceptualize women as passive victims of structural oppression. Most contemporary research has moved towards recognizing women as active agents of change, emphasizing autonomy, empowerment, and political participation. Second shift, intersectionality and interculturality. The complexity of gender inequality cannot be understood in isolation from other systems of oppression. A second major reconfiguration has been the integration of intersectionality into feminist research, broadening our understanding of how class, race, ethnicity, religion, and other identities shape experiences of discrimination and privilege. The understanding of gender inequality has evolved to incorporate intersectionality, acknowledging the interconnected impact of these social markers. This shift has reinforced the need for policies that address the specific needs of diverse groups of women, particularly in the Global South. Third shift. Over time, feminist research has moved beyond a binary understanding of gender to embrace a more inclusive perspective. By acknowledging the experiences of LGBTQ+ individuals, scholars have deepened discussions on identity, power, and social inclusion. Gender research has broadened beyond a binary focus on women and men to include diverse gender identities. This expansion has led to greater advocacy for LGBTQ+ rights and recognition of the complex ways in which patriarchal structures affect different groups. Fourth shift, rethinking the sex-gender dichotomy. The distinction between sex and gender, once taken for granted, has been critically examined in contemporary feminist research. This forward shift has challenged biological determinism and opened new avenues for rethinking identity, embodiment, and policy frameworks. The initial distinction between sex as biological and gender as social has been deconstructed, recognizing the biological characteristics themselves as socially mediated. This perspective has important implications for policy design, especially in areas like healthcare and legal recognition of gender identity. Research priorities have also shifted in response to social, economic, and political transformation. While some enduring themes remain central, new concerns have emerged. In this regard, I would like to address three key areas that stand out. Our first key area is gender-based violence. Gender-based violence remains a critical issue, with research providing essential data for policy making. Studies have documented that prevalence of violence and its structural causes, leading to stronger legal frameworks and international commitments such as the Sustainable Development Goals. A second key area is gender poverty and economic inequality. Poverty continues to be an urgent concern for gender studies, as research has highlighted the structural nature of women's economic disadvantage, emphasizing the role of unpaid care work, wage gaps, and limited access to resources. Studies advocate for redistributive policies that address the multidimensional nature of poverty. In this context, care work has gained prominence as a third key research area, emphasizing its centrality to economic and social sustainability. A main tool for advance this can be for feminist foreign policy, since it represents a transformative approach to international relations that integrates gender equality and diplomacy, cooperation, and security. The achievement of advances in gender equality has been made possible thanks to the intense and committed activity of feminist movements, international organizations, and academia, which varying degrees in different countries have engaged in fruitful dialogues. I have 5 questions. I don't know if you have it. No?
Can you share the question? Just complete the question.
Okay. First one, how can feminist foreign policy effectively incorporate intersectionality? That's a big challenge. What mechanisms ensure accountability in the implementation of gender-sensitive international policies? How does climate change disproportionately impact women? And how can foreign policy address these inequalities? What role does digital technology play in the evolution of care work and gender equality? How can feminist research contribute to decolonizing global governance structures? Thank you.
Problem. Okay, I'll get started for you today and so getting like fantastic. Thank you, everyone. And we're going to put more make for that country. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. It's Carla Akil from the Aspiring Institute. Thank you so much for being with us. We're going to move on to the final part of the discussion. And I would like to ask the panelists to come to the table. Lydia, Fahima, and Zeina. Again, thank you so much for being with us today. So, you're all feminist activists with varying journeys that flow across borders and geographies. You have also been part of various processes and iterations that inform the journey leading to feminist foreign policies. However, at this point in time, as we discussed today, the challenges are greater than before. Conflicts, economic and climate downfalls, authoritarianism, and massive displacement are some of the challenges we are dealing with today. In your opinion, what are the strategies for resisting these challenges, for pushing back the backlash and maintaining strength, stamina, and creativity? We will start with you, Lydia.
Thank you, Han. Good morning, and thanks to Lina and the Institute for the invitation. And I really want to say I'm really honored to be here sharing the space with so many incredible feminists that not only did Beijing, but got us here. And I really want to clap for them. I want to know this I think it's part of honoring, and I think that's a really important strategy because it takes us back to not only remember where we come from, but actually building from the knowledge, experience, and strategies that we have been using, what have worked, what hasn't worked. And I don't think we're doing that enough these days. So that's one initial strategy. But I want to put, from the challenges you mentioned, one that I want to put on the table because I think is really important. It's the challenge of the fact that women's rights activists on the ground and movements, even human rights defenders, are being the targets of so much violence. And I think that this is something that we really need to address urgently and in a very effective way. And I think I don't need to make the case very strongly here for how important John and other kinds of organizing on the ground and at all levels has been enough for move forward the transformations. But I want to say a couple of things. One is that since Beijing, women's leadership, our forms of organizing our power was really transformed, and it grew, and it diversified in different ways, not only because sectors that were not very well organized, when we got to Beijing, became really well organized. I'm thinking, for example, of indigenous women, of sex workers, of transgender women. That because women, who have been always part of very diverse social movements, became the leaders of those movements too. So climate justice movement, labor movements, movement for land rights, and so on, that are mixed movements, currently have very strong feminist and women's leaders. What does it mean? It means not only that we're in very important sides of the struggle, but it means we're confronting a lot of actors like extractive industries, corporations, technology industries, media, local oligarchies, organized front, and so that means that the women's rights defenders are in the intersection of a lot of violence, defending, pushing failure, and also creating the new ideas for the vision that we need to. So that means that violence that we're seeing in the territories is very much the result of the dispute for the control over resources and the control over power and territories at all levels. So if we don't do something to address this violence, then the very people that are moving this agenda are the targets, and we increase our power. And that's the whole purpose, silencing us, demobilizing us, freezing us. And we know that we are not going to be, but there are a lot of different extreme expressions of violence we're seeing. And I want to give you some examples of the kinds of attacks I'm talking about, because they're not small. We're talking about slandering campaigns, stigmatization. We're talking about criminalization. So many activists on the ground right now have cases open against them, fabricated, and really crippling them in many ways. We are talking about forced disappearances, and we're talking about killings. In Mexico and Central America, we keep a registry, my organization, of killings against human rights defenders. And since 2012, we have documented 200 killings and 228 attempts of killings. And we have documented over 35,000 attacks against close to 9,000 women's human rights defenders. And as I said, it's a very broad array of violence, but the effects are very real in organizations that are heavily under-resourced, as we were talking, and are the targets of all this violence. So strategies, concrete strategies. First, we need to really put issues of protection and care at the center of all agendas.
Yes.
When doing movement building, when thinking about how to bring the activists to the different tables and partner among ourselves. And that means building capacity for collective protection on the ground. It means building infrastructure that can really support. I mean, right now, we're in need of safe houses, of care and healing houses, of different mechanisms for moving people from one country to the other, because a lot of the defenders are having to go into exile to protect their lives and not be detained. We have to share knowledge and experience of what is working on the ground and what is not working. And we need to strengthen the networks for solidarity. This is so crucial in the moment. And here is a really important strategy, an amazing power and potential that I don't think we're tapping enough, which is we can be there for each other regarding the issue, the movement, and the work we're doing on the ground. We can be responding and be there and have each other's back when responding to violence. And in that way, we are winning movements that start to be what Anita was saying, which is building that agenda that is broader, that is talking about how we care for the earth and each other in this sort of moment. And so how do we tap into the power of the fact that feminist and women's rights activists are across all these struggles now and can do, again, in a particular different way, what we did for Beijing was to build a very strong common agenda that we all got behind. but we actually need to have each other's back for protection. And there is very complete recommendation for feminist foreign policy here. We need good migration policies in general, but for activists, please enforce good asylum and refugee policies that can open the borders of our country to receive women defenders that are being persecuted and don't have any place to go and are being restricted from their nationalities. That's a very complete, and I think at the heart of feminist foreign policy, we need to talk about policy coherence at all levels. That's very important, and migration policy and support for women defenders needs to be there. So yes, I think that's it. I know that Fahima started talking about care, but I think it's so important that we're talking about sustaining the lives of activists, and therefore our movements and our struggles. We put care at the center, not as well-being and having yoga one by place. No, care as justice. Care is something that we provided for the world and for the planet, and that we have the right to, not in the future, but now, because caring for our lives is creating sustainability for our movements. And is also enjoying rights in the present, which is something we fight for. We don't only fight for rights for the future, we do, but we fight for rights right now. Care is a right, and care is fundamental to sustain our movements and our struggles.
Thank you so much, Lydia. I think this is a great segue to talk about the context in Sudan with Fahima. And you can tell us a bit about the challenges that the human rights defenders are facing, and what you think are the strategies that we can utilize in order to resist these challenges.
And thank you so much, and I'm very grateful to be here, really grateful for the Aspen Institute, the AUB, and to my friend Lina Abou-Habib for this invitation to be here as opportunity. It's a great village where we always have read about, and we met maybe sometime briefly in the international meetings, but it's great to be with everyone from today. Looking back at Beijing 30 years ago, I think it was a moment. The conference itself was the moment for Sudanese women organization to start. Actually, it was that time when women organization was established, just after the Beijing platform of action. And the conference was actually, even though our fundamental Islamist government was really putting a lot of kindness on public spaces, but yet they signed with not care. With that, I mean, they signed the Beijing platform of action, and they want to commit to it. So we wanted to get that moment and really face the government by they have to implement what they have signed for. And then we started. A lot of groups came out. We were learning. Of course, there's a lot of things that we used to know, but we were learning how to work on this and to really see the situation. And I must say, 17 years, I think I want to just, with the point that Lydia said, we need to continue our resistance, and how women have been, in my country, women have been actually in the forefront of everything. Even with closed doors, with slim spaces for civil society or public spaces for people to navigate rights, women will always be in the front line. They have never been scared or afraid of keeping quiet. And after 17 years of our work, we were forced close by the government, saying we have been dismantling their, what they call stabilization Islamic project. And I think at that moment, I said to the security guy, I don't think I feel more proud of this moment to say that to me, and I feel we have done what we wanted to do. And even if it was 17 years was enough to have engaged with maybe more than 15,000 people in different parts of Sudan, and I think for me that was something that we did together.
And then we felt like, okay, our war is ended, but we need to start in a different, and maneuver different ways and means. At this moment, we're talking about a state failure. We're talking about war that's affected everybody, not only women, not only men, not only children. It's just like dismantling and a country that's died. No infrastructure, no health services, nothing. It's actually now announcing famine with 70% of humanitarian aid being cut after the U.S. government announcing USAID closure. And so in this situation, I still feel women are doing their best to change this situation. I tell you today, when the war started, especially in the Khartoum, like it's the capital city where people have never experienced war before, even those that has a long history of war, the women were the lead to evacuate, were the ones who took decisions to move out, they to protect the elderly, to protect their children, to protect people who were going to their places. Men couldn't take those decisions. And they were the ones that would actually maintain even the economic life of their families by doing whatever kind of jobs. I see them in Egypt, I see them in Uganda or in Kenya, and the places they are even moving out. This is where people who are refugees now and people who have moved from one safer place inside Sudan to another place, they are still facing challenges because now there are multiple displacement, like after Khartoum, the Jazeera state, then the River Nile state. So those families have been, for the last 2 years, moved maybe 3 or 4 or 5 times from one place to another just to have a safe space. Men couldn't do it. And I think I just want to quote Ayman when I said this after a short survey with you in Cairo. He said, "You're right, because my wife is the one who made the decision. She's the one who moved us out. And 3 months I couldn't do anything. I was just trying to sleep, trying to eat, and thinking of everything that's being collapsed. I have no business, I have no money, I don't know where to go. But she's the one who people out." So at this moment, I want to just say, still with a lot of a lot of strategies that this movement have already been creating, like solidarity, collectiveness, looking at how could we network and engage and learn from each other. I want to share an experience that I had is, let me just read, right? Because I don't know how to say. The Mexico Central American Initiative of Women Human Rights Defenders, where I had the opportunity to go with the support of Gloria, or Gloria, that I think it was actually created a huge shift into the work that we've been doing. And as Lydia said, the care is not the center of just having yoga or deep breathing or just, close your eyes and try to imagine a different world. But it's actually something that's really crucial for us to, because the healing process needs time. It needs also resources. It needs a lot of processes and brains and justice. So I think this has really shifted the work after the war. This experience we have tried now, we have been training some, and maybe in the process of the coming months we will be translating some of these materials into Arabic. So we expand the information about the feminist holistic protection approach, which is something that has really changed the way that we have been working on. One thing that I also want to say, sometimes when we started working on women's rights issues as feminists, we always think feminism is going to be stick only with paper Khuri. You feel this is something will never come out of us, go to a generation, go to another groups, spread all over the country. That might be a big dream that we never thought that certainly fulfilled in our lifetime. And after the revolution in 2019 in Sudan,
same thousands of women who call themselves feminists, change happens without us realizing it. And not only that, but also looking at a strategy that I feel it's really crucial, not only for us, for everybody's intersectionality. Looking at, I never thought that I would be working in sex workers in Sudan. I would never thought that I would work with LGBTQ in Sudan, which is something that is now here and we are doing it. And it is making us feel like it is happening. It could be, you just need to be, with our resilience and persistency has to continue. And we have to be hopeful always and patient. And in 2020, I was listening to an internet radio that was bringing some young voices from Sudan. And this woman was introducing her herself. And she said, an LGBTQ activist in Sudan, in Khartoum, in a radio station. I thought that would also be something that would never happen. So for me, I feel that this is, for me, it's just, we can't stop the work here. I think we are making changes. I think we are doing this. And I feel one of the major things that has helped in this is our international connections, regional connections, and sisterhood that we have built all over these last 30 years. And I feel this is one of the strategies should be a crucial one to do, and we work on it. And another thing is the encourage joy, creativity, imagination, tools for resistance, for these spaces, for collective coming, like now artists, dancers, singers are engaged also in our first movement. So I think this is something that we should not, the inclusivity and not to leave someone behind is important for us to continue doing. And continue pushing government, multilateral institutions, donors to adopt feminist foreign policies that protest and make human rights. And so I think hold staying accountable, because, for example, in our case, one of the things that we felt that could be, if it happened, that could be very important, that when he made some changes, is to hold people who commit not only violence or atrocities accountable, not to go with impunity without them being, responsible or punished for the pain they are being causing, not only to women, to everybody that they are going through this experience of torture and violence and sexual violence. I think this is going to be one of the areas that we need to work on, because now the atrocity that happened and the violence against women and rape cases that has been increasing every day. UNICEF last week just wrote a report talking about 221 young girls and boys between 0 and 5 years old has been raped. So I think there's nothing we could be more ugly than this. And those people should really should not go without being punished for what they are doing. So finally, I just say inspiration, hope, and connectivity, and also documenting our narratives, writing our stories, writing women biographies, bringing that, creating leadership voices for younger generation to understand that women have never stopped doing that, because by hearsay, by just making it an oral history that people talk about, this woman have done this and this woman have done that, it will be forgotten one time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fahima, for highlighting the centrality of care, sisterhood, and also accountability and justice. And I'd like to move to Zeina. In Lebanon, recently experienced a war and massive displacement, and we are also experiencing the rise of anti-rights movements. So there are many different challenges. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the best way to navigate, and what are the strategies to navigate all of these challenges that we are facing in Lebanon? Thank you, Carla. I'm going to be talking about sometimes foreign policy from the funding perspective. I think it's very timely to end our interventions today by tangible asks. So 3 years ago, the premise of gender equality ignited hope and marked significant progress. The platform for action included a call to provide significant and flexible funding to women rights organizations, especially in the global south. This commitment was never fulfilled, and we only received 1% of the ODA. Yet, and despite this minimal percentage, women rights organizations were able to advance gender equality, peace and security, climate justice, as we've heard from all the panelists. And here, we cannot but note the important role that feminist funds have played in channeling funds to those at the forefront of the fight of gender justice and who are least capable of accessing resources. Feminist funds have historically adapted to meet the urgent needs of marginalized communities, particularly women, girls, and gender-expansive individuals during times of crisis. And I would like to highlight the transformative potential of feminist funding, feminist, flexible, long-term, sustained funding as a tool for the feminist movement and resilience, especially in the Middle East and North Africa region. I'm not going to be talking specifically about Lebanon, but more about the MENA. So the Real Feminist Fund is a feminist fund that's founded, led by, and serving feminist movement from the Middle East and North Africa region, which is currently one of the most challenging contexts globally. We have ongoing compounded crises across multiple countries, including unpredictable escalation of violence, as we heard from the colleague from Syria just now, long-term impacts of conflict, natural disasters, humanitarian impact of these crises on the most vulnerable communities is vast. Crises such as conflict and natural disasters have created particular challenges for specific populations, namely refugees who face discrimination in accessing collective shelters and services, LGBTQI+ individuals who encounter heightened risks during crisis and exclusion from emergency services, people with disabilities, migrant workers who are often excluded from formal protection systems. All of these groups face increased vulnerability. Human services as well are impeded during the height of the crisis, so elderly women, pregnant women cannot access HR services. Despite all these challenges, the civil society organization and the feminist movement in the region are leading crucial response efforts. They are working to address immediate humanitarian needs while maintaining a focus on the long-term structural changes that are needed to build resilience and equality. Today, the gains that we fought, I'm really humbled to say I put with all the amazing women that we have in the room, but that you all have fought for, are being threatened, are under attack. Not by accident, but by design. The decision by several governments and philanthropic actors to cut off funding during the past few years is a calculated move to impede women's access to education, to SRHR services, and the decision-making spheres, thus disrupting the roadmap towards gender justice. The recent funding cuts just by two governments, namely the US and Dutch governments, were recently estimated to be around $730 million a year. MENA is the region that receives the least percentage of human rights funding, with only $67 billion going to MENA, despite all of the crises that we are going through. And we all know that during crisis, funding is channeled through humanitarian aid. And humanitarian aid is by no means gender responsive, gender transformative. They're aspiring to be gender sensitive, but it's still not. So we have been receiving and found increasing applications with each grant renewal cycle, with the latest one having tripled the number of eligible applications, which shows the extreme needs of the feminist groups, the minimal resources that are available for feminist organizations, collectives, initiatives, and organizations in the region. We need to support feminist groups in conflict-affected countries in Palestine, Yemen, Libya, Syria, Iraq, Sudan, Lebanon. Feminist groups that are facing intersectional forms of discrimination and are struggling towards just and sustained peace. We need to invest in feminist groups in Lebanon and Tunisia, countries that have been the most progressive in terms of women and queer rights and have been witnessing fierce attacks from the anti-right and anti-gender movements, but are still pushing forward an intersectional feminist agenda. We need to invest in feminist movements struggling with ever-shrinking civic spaces in renowned African countries. Feminist groups are relentlessly fighting and coming together in formal and informal spaces to reflect, learn, and strategize. Traditional funding models have to shift towards more inclusive, responsive, and sustainable mechanisms for feminist movements and feminist funds who have been adopting strategies, and innovative approaches to respond with agility, innovation in times of crisis are best positioned to channel funding to grassroots organizations and groups. While human rights instruments may be diminishing, movements are reimagining possibilities all about that. Although traditional international human rights tools may no longer offer protection, collective power remains a viable option. The focus continues to be on supporting and amplifying movement building within the philanthropic ecosystem, securing the rights of feminist activists to exist and resist. This is what we do. And finally, we cannot but call on all governments, especially those who have adopted the feminist foreign policy, to take decisive action and commit to long-term investment in feminist activism as a critical strategy to reduce inequalities and work towards a more democratic, equitable society and sustainable plan